The LS26 is the newest addition to the support class's arsenal of weaponry in Battlefield 5, and at that, the first LMG to be added post-launch for the game. Not only is it finally a new toy for the support class player who doesn't enjoy the MMGs to play around with, but it's also quite the competent LMG at that, and as we'll be looking at in today's video, quite the competition to some of the most popular fully automatic weapons we currently have in the game. Now, thanks to the fresh release of the weapon stats for this weapon by the guys over at the Simthic forums, we can talk about not only the weapon stats in today's video, but also of course the specializations available and which ones I would recommend, for what reasons, how the weapon compares to some of the competition out there, including of course weapons within the LMG class of weaponry but also outside of it, and lastly how to get the most out of this weapon when using it on the battlefield. But of course, as per usual, we jump straight into the stats. The LS26 comes with the usual damage model to be expected from an LMG. With a maximum damage of 25 and a minimum damage of 18.5, you have your guaranteed 4-shot kill up until and including 10 meters. From that point onwards, up until 50 meters, you're looking at a 5-shot body shot kill, and from 50 meters onwards, you're going to require 6 body shots to down your target. Its fire rate, identical to the STG-44 at 599 rounds per minute, is the second highest in the LMG class of weaponry, beat out of course only by the FG-42. Its mag size, similar to the previously mentioned FG-42, is very limited on the other hand, at only 20 shots available. On the other hand, its reload time is relatively good, with a short reload at 2.3 seconds and a relatively painful long reload at 3.3 seconds. Its recoil is, unsurprisingly for the fire rate of the weapon, not amongst the lowest in the LMG category of weaponry, but at the same time most definitely controllable, with 0.7 vertical, with each additionally fully automatically fired shot taking off 0.03 degrees of recoil from that vertical value, because of course in Battlefield 5 vertical recoil on LMGs consecutively actually becomes less, unlike most of the other automatic weapons out there. Its horizontal recoil is tame but noticeable at 0.2 to the left and right. That can be further improved by specializations as well, and its spread values are those to be expected from an LMG, with 0.15 for the aiming down sight accuracy while not moving, 0.4 while aiming down sight and moving simultaneously, and the usual relatively poor hipfire performance at 4.5 minimum degrees of spread when hipfiring and moving simultaneously. In terms of your specializations and upgrades then, this upgrade or specialization tree, if you so will, is essentially identical to that of the STG-44, and thus begins between a choice of slings and swivels for faster switching between your primary and secondary weapon, or quick aim for a 33% faster ADS time. Then if you go down the left hand side, you'll be looking at the enhanced grip, giving you more accurate hipfire, followed by the polished action specialization, giving you longer maintained accuracy while hipfiring. If you go down the right hand side, you're looking at the ported barrel, giving this weapon a decrease to its horizontal recoil, followed by the barrel bedding, improving the accuracy of this weapon while aiming down sight and standing still simultaneously. Lastly, then you have the choice between either the Recoil Buffer, which decreases the vertical recoil of this weapon, or between the custom stock, improving the accuracy of this weapon while moving and aiming down sight simultaneously. To be noted about the Recoil Buffer specialization, usually I don't recommend it for the reason that up until now, with all the weapons that I've looked at, it actually tentatively only decreases the added or decreased recoil for consecutive shots. Don't need to fully understand what it means, but essentially it doesn't decrease the largest portion of your vertical recoil. Now, according to the updated stats on Simthic, and I don't know if this has been a change in the recent patch that we just got today, or if it's been an introduction that has come for a longer period of time, or the stats were wrong in the past, it actually seems like the vertical recoil decrease, the Recoil Buffer upgrade, does a lot more in terms of recoil decrease and should actually be more impactful. Thus, in the case of this weapon, the LS26, or weapons such as the STG-44 or the MP40, this is now a far more viable specialization to use. But in terms of specialization choices then, of course you have essentially two. You can either go down more or less the left-hand side, going for a more hipfire focused build where it doesn't really matter between your first and your last choice, but most definitely going for those two hipfire focused upgrades. The disadvantage of that, of course, will be that you will be significantly hampered by your limited magazine. You're not great reload time if you don't have any bullets left in your chamber or in your mag when you reload. And of course the fact that your fire rate, while high, is no match to most of the close quarter focused SMGs or assault rifles. On the other hand, it is nevertheless a competent weapon and will still be controllable at the more medium ranges this weapon is more designed for. If you go for the right hand side, in my case, my personal preference is actually quick aim, port to barrel, barrel bedding, and then the recoil buffer, you'll be having an essentially even more accurate version of the weapon, better suited for the more medium long range, medium close quarter range, not however that chaotic full on close quarters. There the mag size becomes less impactful, but it does mean that at those engagement distances, most definitely in 9 out of 10 times, you will not be taking on more than 1 or 2 targets simply because you don't have the bullets available. But that brings us nicely into how this weapon compares to some of the competition out there. Because for those of you who are slightly more familiar with some of the weapon stats of the weapons that I've reviewed on this channel, you will quickly have noticed that essentially the LS26 is a carbon copy of the STG-44 with a slightly smaller magazine. That's pretty much the only noticeable difference. The other one that I could find is that the muzzle velocity of the LS26 is significantly higher at 800 meters per second than the STGs at 620 meters per second, which for the actual more longer range situations will actually make a difference. It means you have to lead your targets a little bit less, and if they're moving all around the place, you're more likely to hit them, and their erratic movement doesn't help them quite as much. But other than that, the recoil is but for 1 or 2% exactly the same. The accuracy differences are more or less negligible, and so are any differences in damage models, because ultimately they have the same bullet to kill at any distance that you can possibly fire this weapon at. Simply the LS26 has a slightly higher minimum damage, meaning that if you're shooting at hurt targets, you may be able to squeeze, say, a 5-shot kill at more longer ranges, where the STG would need 6 shots to down its target. That aside then, of course, if you enjoy the STG, you will enjoy this weapon. It trades a lower magazine count for the advantage of having a slightly higher minimum damage, a higher muzzle velocity, making the more medium long range engagements slightly more viable, and a bipod if you have to go full long range, something that the STG-44 of course does not have and cannot bring to the table. Now, in combination with considering the mag, clearly, the role of this weapon is a slightly more longer range version of the STG-44, at distances where if you miss too many shots and you can't take down your target because you don't have enough shots in your mag, you can comfortably hide behind cover and reload your weapon without getting in too much trouble. That, of course, in close quarter usually isn't a thing. You usually just get mowed down if you run out of bullets or you miss too many shots, and the whole situation is a little bit more unforgiving. Thus, the STG, alongside, of course, its slightly better hipfire and some of the more moving-focused accuracy attributes of the assault rifles, is slightly more suited to the close quarter range role. That's not to say that the LS26 can't fit it, especially if you go for the left-hand side of the specialization tree and focus on hipfire. A most effective weapon, just not the most effective at those engagement distances. Thus, my recommendation would be to play this weapon on an ADS-focused mid-range engagement distance setup, focusing on keeping a little bit of distance between your targets, but feeling free to kind of push onto the objective with your team when you have to, and then engage targets a little bit further away when you can. Making use of the bipod is certainly not a bad idea, and an interesting point actually about the LS26 is that very much like the STG-44, there's a whole variety of scopes that really are viable on this weapon. A lot of weapons have too much recoil for the higher magnification scopes in Battlefield 5, but weapons such as the STG and this LS26 can comfortably be used with the 3x magnified optic if that's your kind of style. I found the AA iron sights to be highly effective as well and provide a pretty good clear sight picture. But that wraps it up pretty much for the LS26. It's a most effective medium range aggressive LMG and adds another very competent LMG to the support class's arsenal, already relatively rich thanks to the excellent FG42, the excellent KE7 and the masterful Bren gun for long range distances. But let me know down below in the comments what you think of the LS26 now that most of you have been able to play with it for a couple of days. Leave those experiences as well as, of course, your usual video suggestions and feedback down below in the comments, or hit me up with them on Twitter. If you found the video helpful, enjoyable, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.